Hey everyone, happy Monday and welcome to the Electrification Coalition's webinar on green financing. This webinar kicks off our third annual Charging Infrastructure Week. We began Charging Infrastructure Week 3 years ago as a way to follow the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Since then, we have seen historic investments in EVs and electric vehicle infrastructure. Over the course of the week, you'll hear from us through webinars and social media about what has been happening over the past year. Today, we kick off Charging Infrastructure Week on green financing. As clean energy projects go from ideation to operation, financing has been a question mark. We've heard many people ask, we want to pursue these projects, but don't have the means to pay for them. Or if we are awarded federal funding, how does that work? And what do we need to do to prepare ourselves? And what options are out there? So today, we hope to hear those questions and more as we have three excellent panelists bringing their knowledge onto the subject. Before we begin, we'll go over some housekeeping. Each of our panelists will have about 15 minutes to present. At the end, we will have a Q&A, so if you can put all your questions into the chat, we'll try to get to as many as we can. This event is being recorded and will be sent out later in the week. And join us for our next webinar on Thursday as we look at the state of the EV and EV infrastructure industry. The webinar will go over where we're at and what we have to look forward to when it comes to EV and EV infrastructure. I believe the link will be put in the chat by my colleague, Michael. So we have three wonderful presenters today. Our first presenter is Francisco Sayu, the Vice President in Productivity and Sustainability at Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Take it away, Francisco.
Thank you, Brent, and thank you for the opportunity to join this incredible conversation. As you said, my name is Francisco Sayu. I am Vice President of Productivity and Sustainability here at the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, WEDC. I have a background in engineering, and I spent most of my professional career on the technical side of the clean energy transition. I also have spent some years on the regulatory side of energy, and now here at WEDC, I have the honor and the pleasure of supporting financing tools to deploy clean energy projects. As an engineer, I love the technology. I love to see the solutions these projects offer, but it's often challenging to figure out how to pay for them. So I'm super excited to be in a role where I can support financial tools to make this happen. Going to the next slide. So before I go any further, let me tell you a little bit about my organization, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. We are the lead economic development agency for the state of Wisconsin. Our mission is to strategically invest in Wisconsin to enhance the economic well-being of people and their businesses and community. And our vision is an economy for all, where every Wisconsinite has the opportunity to thrive. We understand that access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy play a big role in our communities and our communities' well-being. Therefore, we're committed to supporting the state's clean energy goals. As many of you know, Wisconsin released its first clean energy plan in 2022, and that plan outlines a number of strategies to help the state move to a clean energy economy, including transitioning to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050, addressing energy-related inequalities for low-income and minority communities, and creating equitable clean energy jobs. Following that, so one of the reasons I often like to talk about the why we're making the decisions we're making and doing the work we're doing is, transportation plays a big role in the clean energy transition, because if you look at our national emissions, about 30%, 29% of those emissions come from the transportation sector. Now, if you look at Wisconsin, we spend about $10 billion each year importing transportation fuels. Wisconsin is not a petroleum producing state. So transitioning to electric transportation will help us keep some of our energy dollars in the state and boost local economies. So for that reason, back in 2023, April 2023, Governor Evers issued Executive Order 195, and that established the Green Ribbon Commission on Clean Energy and Environmental Innovation. And that directs the Department of Administration and WDC to evaluate models for a green bank, which is the Green Innovation Fund. And that's how our organization, the Green Innovation Fund, our state's green bank, got started. So the Green Ribbon Commission is tasked with advising the Department of Administration and WDC on establishing the Green Innovation Fund, potential funding sources for that fund, as well as stakeholder engagement strategies. So Green Bank, the Green Innovation Fund is Wisconsin's green bank. I want to make that clear. We are intentional about using the Green Innovation Fund rather than the green bank term to signal to our lending partners, banks, credit unions, CDFIs, that we're here to support the work they do instead of competing with them. Our goal is to provide credit enhancements so that our private lenders and credit unions and CDFIs become comfortable financing clean energy projects. We are driven by the mission of accelerating the transition to clean energy using a model of financing, no grants. That's also an important distinction. And our goal is to leverage public funds and to attract private investments. The benefits and goals of the Green Bank are to lower energy costs for families and businesses, to expand access to clean, affordable energy options, to reduce carbon emissions and mitigate the effects of climate change, and to build more resilient communities in Wisconsin. Green banks are a proven concept, so we're not doing anything super innovative, in terms of the concept. And green banks have been around for a while, and they have played a transformative role in financing clean energy projects. The concept emerged in the late 2000s as a way to leverage public and private capital to accelerate the transition to clean energy. The first state-level green bank, the Connecticut Green Bank, was established in 2011. I'm a big fan of the Connecticut Green Bank and their leadership. And that Connecticut Green Bank was created to address gaps in clean energy financing, particularly for projects that were often seen as too risky by the private sector. Now, following the Connecticut's Green Bank lead, other states, counties, cities, and nonprofit organizations began to develop their own green banks. These institutions have focused on mobilizing private investment in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and other sustainability projects, including financing of electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure, providing products like loans, loan guarantees, and credit enhancements that support decarbonization. At this moment, the Green Innovation Fund is a state green bank, but we don't have any funding from the state yet. Therefore, our primary capitalization strategy is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a program created by the Inflation Reduction Act. And most of you are probably familiar with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, GGRF, but I think it's worth doing a quick recap to make sure that we are all on the same page. So the Inflation Reduction Act created this program. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is administered by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and within that are three programs: the Solve for All program, the National Clean Investment Fund, and the Clean Community Investment Accelerator. So as a green bank, emerging green bank, we are heavily relying on this fund to make sure that we have the dollars to make the clean energy investments that we plan to support in Wisconsin. Let me just provide a little bit more detail into these programs. So one of the programs, Solve for All, we are currently benefiting from the program. The Clean Innovation Fund was awarded $62 million from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund under Solve for All. And we're currently planning the implementation of that program, which is scheduled to roll out funding sometime next year. Now, the second program, the National Clean Investment Fund, was awarded to 3 national green banks to establish clean financing institutions that provide access and affordable funding for clean energy projects nationwide. And we are currently working with these national green banks to identify opportunities to bring some of those investments into the state of Wisconsin. And the third program, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, was awarded to 5 organizations that provide technical assistance and financial support to community lenders serving low-income and disadvantaged communities. Yeah, well, the Green Innovation Fund currently does not have any funding to support transportation electrification projects. We are working with these national green banks to make sure that we can provide support to some of those projects. Once we are capitalized, we plan to provide support for projects for the purchase of electric vehicles, and that could be for passenger vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, school buses. I spent several years working for an organization here in Wisconsin called Renew Wisconsin. And some of my work there was to support school districts with the transition to electric school buses. And I am a huge fan of that program, the Clean School Bus Program, and I can see that I have seen the benefits of that transition. So we are looking forward to having access to National Clean Investment Fund to support the school districts that are working to transition. Some of the school districts that are applying for the Clean School Bus Program are now priority districts, which means they can only receive up to $170,000 for a bus. So we're looking to create mechanisms to support those districts with gap funding, gap financing, so they can purchase their buses after they receive their awards from EPA. We plan to finance EV charging infrastructure, as well as resiliency projects. We know electric vehicles are just big batteries on wheels, and we're looking forward to leveraging that capacity, that energy storage to support communities during emergencies and other clean energy technologies that decarbonize and help us enhance the economic well-being of our state. Again, financing for electric vehicles is not a new concept. We have some examples of organizations and green banks that are already doing great work in this space. One of the examples I like to talk about is from Montgomery County Green Bank, and they have a great project, a great program where, in partnership with GM, they provide bridge financing for multifamily building owners to install electric vehicle charging stations in their facilities, in the multifamily buildings. So tenants, renters have the possibility to own electric vehicles and charge those vehicles at home. We know there is a huge difference between the cost of charging at home and charging using public infrastructure. And this is a great way to support people who live in multifamily dwellings to have access to home charging so that they can fully explore the benefits of owning an EV. And again, while we don't have the funding at this point to support this type of program, it is the type of things that we are setting up to do once our bank is capitalized. And we look forward to the opportunity to working with the national green banks, making sure that we can make this happen in the state. I believe that takes me to my last slide, which is just a screenshot of our website. I hope you have the opportunity to go and check out our website. And if you can subscribe to our mailing list, we'll keep you updated on what's happening here at the Green Innovation Fund. And with that, I think I will pass it to the next presenter. Thank you.
All right, Francisco, thank you so much. And thank you for representing our home state so well, state of Wisconsin. Next up, we have Nadia El-Malek, the Senior Vice President from the Senior Vice President, Strategic Partnerships at Coalition for Green Capital. Nadia, take it away.
All right, good afternoon. I think for most folks, maybe good morning for some. Pleasure to be with you here today. Francisco, great tee up. This is, I think, a wonderful, wonderful segue because you gave an excellent overview of green banks, and the Coalition for Green Capital has, of course, supported the state green banks for many years and has recently been funded through the GGRF with $5 billion. A portion of that we are going to be working with our 18 network partners, which includes many of the state green banks. So very nice tee up here, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about CGC, again, the Coalition for Green Capital, and where we're focused. So as I mentioned, we received from the US EPA $5 billion to capitalize us as a national green bank under the National Clean Investment Fund competition. And our mission is really focusing in investing in the clean power platform for all. So whether we're partnering and working with state green banks or doing direct investment, which CGC can do, and we will be doing, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We are really excited to do 3 things with every investment. Reduce emissions from GHG and other air pollutant emissions, deliver benefits to low income and disadvantaged communities, and then of course, crowd in and mobilize additional private capital. So with that being said, I'll give you, before we focus on some of the more transportation centric areas, I'll just give you a couple of additional background points. So where can we invest? We can invest in distributed energy generation and storage, zero emission buildings, zero emission transportation, which of course is a focus of today's, one of the key focus areas for today's discussion. And then category we call other, which is very broad. So that can include infrastructure such as transmission, distribution, and other enabling technologies. I worked at a utility for 17 years before I joined CGC, so I know how important, and I know you all do, infrastructure is, right? It's the backbone of this clean energy transition and obviously critical for electric transportation. And when we're seeking to invest in qualified projects, that the project will result in. First is, will it reduce or avoid the GHGs? I talked about that. Second, are we going to be delivering additional benefits to American communities? So CGC has committed to at least 50% of our portfolio benefiting LIDACs. And then third, would the project not otherwise have been financed? So we're there to be additive. We're not here to displace private capital, but as Francisco nicely said, we're really helping to bridge where maybe a traditional lender or bank sees a project as a little bit too risky, or they can't be as flexible in the capital stack as we can be. So that's one of our criteria, is that we want to know that the project would likely have not been otherwise financed without us stepping in and helping. And then are we going to be mobilizing that additional private capital? So for every dollar we invest, we want to make sure that we're bringing other dollars to the table. And then the final important point, especially in this area, is it a commercially proven technology? And so what do we mean by that? That means that the technology has been deployed in at least 3 US locations for 5 years. And it doesn't mean the exact configuration, but the components of the technology. So we're not I would say, in early stage technologies. So that brings us to where CGC is focusing its direct investments on the clean transportation side. And really it comes down to fleets and the associated infrastructure and fleets. So we know fleets are disproportionate emissions contributors. So even though they make up about, if we think about the fleet vehicles comprising just under 10% of total vehicles, their emissions profile, for example, GHGs, they represent 25% of GHGs. And we also know that when we're thinking about the infrastructure that's needed and the power demand that's needed to supply particularly fleet depots, it can be, for say like a highway truck stop, you can be talking about as much energy usage as a small city. If we're looking at a logistic depot, that could even be like a stadium. Think about a stadium, right? A football stadium, for example, or basketball or baseball. Pick your favorite stadium, pick a stadium, college, whatever, pros, doesn't matter, but a large stadium. And then even a small business fleet. It might be a nonprofit. It might be, some other entity. It could be a municipal fleet that can put enough electric demand on the grid to represent about 80 homes. So what does that mean? We know, we're hearing from potential borrowers in the community at large that there's really some challenges for zero emission fleets. One is the timing mismatch, because you can now that we're out of the pandemic, for example, you can get a Class 8 truck, e-Cascadia, for example, in months, not years. But if your depot is going to be triggering major utility upgrades, thinking about like a distribution substation, that could be 2 to 6 years to build that out, or a transmission substation. So what are the other solutions, right? So one is we can invest in traditional, we can help a project with helping to invest in some of the traditional infrastructure, but also what roles do battery storage, on-site battery storage play? Over time, we know there's a lot of talk about vehicle to X and all of that. Obviously still maturing technology, but how do you incentivize charging where you can? Because not all fleets, for example, can charge off peak, but how do you have projects that bring that all together to kind of right size some of the infrastructure? And even can we help with some proactive build out so that we ensure this transition is smooth? So we also hear vehicle upfront costs are a big challenge, and insurance. Sometimes that can be a gap. So those are all areas we are exploring. And I'll be done here in just a minute. I'm just going to hit a couple of additional points. So we want to help with fleet vehicles and infrastructure to help projects that are lowering upfront costs, helping address timing mismatches, thinking about the cultural mindset it takes to shift, right? So if you're a municipal fleet, for example, and everyone is used to internal combustion engines, it takes, support and training to get folks to understand and see, okay, charging might be a little different than going to the filling up at the gas pump, right? So how do we make sure that we're supporting the cultural transition and providing training on things like electricity rates? How do you deal with fire risk? All of the topics that we all hear about. So we're looking for holistic projects that can help fleets transition. I will say it doesn't mean that we're not looking at any projects that might involve, for example, transitioning fleets that are, think about like, high mileage vehicles. So that might be rideshare, for example. So we are interested in that because we know that those vehicles are driven a lot. And if we could help kind of in the aggregate, that would be great. So that's kind of a high level of our focus areas. We can be very flexible with how we invest for our direct investing. So, typically it's going to be debt financing. We could be junior, senior, but we also do have the ability to take an equity position. And we can also look at things like credit enhancements, bridge financing, you name it, we can probably think about being creative there. So with that being said, please visit our website, Coalition for Green Capital, to get more information. If you have project ideas, please submit them. There's a way to do that on the site. And I thank you for your time, and we're looking forward to working with the community to help get more EVs on the road.
Thank you, Nadia. That was excellent. We will now move on to Bennett Byerly, the Climate Policy and Finance Strategist for S2 Strategies.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks so much to all the folks in the audiences working across your communities to decarbonize, particularly transportation here, but I know that you all are working on so many issues, and it's really inspiring to hear all of those stories. I can jump in to my slides to share a little bit about who we are at S2 Strategies, and then we'll zoom out to cover what are the clean energy financing resources, particularly at the federal level, and how do those trickle down to states, cities, community organizations, and a variety of other entities here. So S2 Strategies, briefly, is a climate policy and climate finance consulting firm focused on the intersection of where federal climate policy meets on-the-ground realities. We were founded by Sam Ricketts and Shara Motati, who brought a wealth of experience in the federal, state, and NGO spaces, really focused around IRA implementation, and our entire organization works to help solve critical problems at the edge of bringing these resources to local communities. We have a state support center, which focuses on providing resources to state governments in particular, and coordinating a network of technical assistance providers through a vast NGO network. And then we also have a green and inclusive finance team, which is focused on working with a lot of the entities involved with the growing, vibrant ecosystem of green and inclusive finance institutions across the country. So diving in here, here's a broad overview of some of the most important federal tools for clean energy finance more broadly that folks should be aware of. The IRA in particular created a foundation of clean energy tax credits upon which all other investments can be layered and magnified in their overall impact. The IRA expanded clean energy tax credits to include a wide array of different technologies and uncapped many of them to provide unlimited benefits over the course of their time horizons that they are now available for. A couple key ways that the IRA has unlocked the financing mechanisms of clean energy tax credits include elective pay, where non-taxpaying entities can actually get cash payments from the IRS for clean energy tax credits after their project has been completed and placed in service. Secondly, for-profit and taxable entities, they now have a much easier way to sell off tax credits and transfer them to an unrelated entity to free up money for project development earlier in the process of developing a given clean energy project. And the IRA also includes, particularly through the investment tax credit and production tax credit, bonus credits that focus on driving investments in marginalized and disadvantaged communities, including energy communities, as well as for domestic content and low-income communities as well. A second kind of key tool that we want to make sure folks are aware of is the lending authority through the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office, or LPO. This is a massive opportunity for low-cost, large-scale financing from the DOE. And there's a specific component where state energy financing institutions, or really it's a wide, broad definition of what can count here, but an entity that has state funding that invests in clean energy projects can likely qualify. And if a project is supported by a state energy financing institution or a SEFI, they can receive low-cost financing from the DOE's LPO. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that actually works, but it's a pretty significant opportunity for large-scale projects. Then the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which Francisco and Nadia covered in great detail earlier, but is another important tool that can't go overemphasized. And then finally, I listed here, and we'll briefly touch on it, other funding opportunities for EV charging in particular. There's a wide variety of grant programs at the federal level, and then other state-focused incentive programs as well. The Electrification Coalition has an outstanding tool that I know that they share for finding funding for EVs, and I'd recommend using that resource, particularly to navigate those grant opportunities. But an important takeaway is all of these tools should be used in conjunction to further leverage private capital to maximize the scale of impact. All of these can be used to drive in commercial banks and other investment opportunities to free up significant funding for clean energy projects and make them much more financeable. Zooming in a little bit on elective pay, as this is a really key tool to I know there's a lot of cities in the audience, as well as folks who represent nonprofits and community-based organizations. But now governments, nonprofits, and other entities that don't have federal tax liability can actually receive certain clean energy and transportation tax incentives as a cash payment. I have on the slide here a list of all of the eligible tax credits for elective pay, but two to call your attention to are 30C, which is for alternative fuel refueling property, which is EV charging infrastructure, and 45W, which is qualified commercial vehicles. So if you're purchasing a fleet for municipal purpose, check out 45W and make sure that you are filing for direct pay to receive up to $100,000 in direct cash payments for that one in particular. Elective pay is really important because it is a tax-free cash payment from the IRS. There's no competitive application, it's uncapped, and it's often stackable with other grants and federal financing that we'll cover further in this as well. Zooming in on the tax credits that I mentioned earlier that are particularly relevant for EVs, but this is a brief overview of 45W. As with everything, consult a tax professional when you're going about this, and this is not intended to be tax or legal advice, but really to provide a brief overview of this very, very important tax credit that folks can use through direct pay. But the maximum credit on this one is for $40,000, but you can get a significant cash impact for whether it's financing school buses or municipal fleets and other vehicle purchases, as long as it's for primary use with the eligible entity. I have two important resources on the right side of this. If you look up Lawyers for Good Government, they're an outstanding technical assistance provider on elective pay in general. And I recommend checking out their online resources where they answer a variety of questions and answers about it, as well as there's a clean energy tax navigator that they have built that helps take you step by step through the direct pay filing process. And they, as a team, would be more than happy to work with you as well, I believe. Then on for EV charging in particular, 30C is your tax credit to look further into. This is for if you meet certain prevailing wage requirements, can cover up to 30% of a project cost. And again, this is eligible for elective pay, so really important for all the non-tax paying entities in the audience. But this can cover your electric vehicle infrastructure. And again, leaving the resources from Lawyers for Good Government available here. They're an outstanding resource to help bring about this tax incentive as well. For EV charging in particular, the EV charging infrastructure has to be located in certain census tracts for it to be eligible for that 30C tax credit that we just covered. So if you follow this link or look at the Department of Energy 30C tax credit eligibility locator, you can see which areas within your community are covered by this. I have a screenshot here of where I'm from in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and you can see that there are a wide variety of different communities that would qualify for this really important tax credit. So I'd recommend looking at that as a part of your project planning in your community. Now, transitioning over to another critical tool that we want to make sure is on folks' mind is the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office. You may have heard about Title 17 before. This is a lending authority through the Department of Energy for innovative clean energy technologies. You often might read large news clips of the LPO creating a loan for, in this case, EVgo to create a nationwide network of charging infrastructures and support the manufacturing of that. Received a 1.5 or 1.05 billion from LPO in low-cost financing to help facilitate that project. These are transformative clean energy investments that the Loan Programs Office helps make available. But there's a particular carve-out where the innovative clean energy technology requirement is actually waived, and LPO can lend to commercial technologies, which include EVs and EV charging infrastructure, for any project that receives meaningful financial support from a state energy financing institution or SEFI. So again, we touched on it briefly, but SEFIs are institutions that have some level of state government funding that can invest in clean energy projects. This could be a state energy office, a state green bank, a Department of Commerce, and you can really get creative with your state government to find what financing institution could be most applicable. And then meaningful financial support is actually a relatively low bar. The Loan Programs Office wants to make this funding accessible. So it can be as low as 2 to 5% of a project's overall cost. And the financing structure is pretty broad. It can happen as a credit enhancement, as a bridge loan for the tax credit, or other forms of equity and debt. If this project is financed with SEFI, the Loan Programs Office can actually cover up to 80% of the project costs. And here, the Loan Programs Office likes to find projects or aggregations of projects that are over 100 million in total capital need. And so this can be a really significant source of low-cost, large-scale financing through the Loan Programs Office, and would really recommend, particularly as you're thinking about projects, if you're working with your state green bank or working with a piece of the state government, try to see if that's a viable path for large-scale projects that you may be involved in. This is just a quick, screenshot example of how transformative this financing can be. But if 80% of a project's cost can be lended through the Loan Programs Office, then the project cost requirements to drive an equity investment in the project are diminished significantly, which makes it a lot easier for other institutions to access this critical level of financing. And we have a couple just quick examples of these projects that qualify for CEFI. So this on the left, there's state and municipal partners that are trying to purchase and utilize zero emissions vehicles. That is a viable project category that can be explored for CEFI. And then on the right, you can think about upgrades to home energy projects that include EV charging infrastructure, for instance, and you can aggregate those projects together to receive CEFI financing as well, and ensure that that project can be done at a relatively low cost of capital. We touched already on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, but it's a really critical grant program from the federal government to catalyze the green finance ecosystem across the country. I just wanted to highlight here a couple of other awardees. So Nadia spoke great about CGC's overall impact and the way that they are prioritizing EVs. Climate United is another NCIF award winner who has committed through their work plan that they published through the EPA about 25% of their total award to invest in clean transportation, which is around 1.5 billion. So a really significant commitment to invest further. And then switching over to the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, or CCIA, which is a GGRF program designed to help community development finance institutions, or CDFIs, start investing in emissions reducing projects and clean energy in general. There were a series of awardees here, the Opportunity Finance Network, which is a network of CDFIs, Inclusive, the Native CDFI network focused on investing in tribal communities across the country, and then also Justice Climate Fund and Appalachian Community Capital are other CCIA award winners. Each of these you can see here has specific commitments that they've made through their work plans to invest in EVs and clean energy, or in clean transportation infrastructure in general. So I'd recommend if you are looking to finance a project in your area, reach out to the local CDFIs, see if they are a CCIA subawardee through a variety of these winners here, and see if you can work with them to help finance your transportation projects that you may have. As Francisco mentioned as well, there's a wide variety of GGRF eligible projects. Here's just one example from Climate United that they shared, but focused on financing school buses as well. Particularly, GGRF is so transformative in the creativity that it allows for clean energy investment opportunities. And so really would recommend using that as a really important source of capital that focuses on emissions reduction and investing in low-income and disadvantaged communities in particular. And then wrapping up here in a minute, but also wanted to share that, as Francisco mentioned, and Nadia alluded to as well, the green banking industry across this country is undergoing a radical transformation and significant growth that GGRF is an important catalytic resource for many of these green banks, but it also is growing beyond that. And new green banks are sprouting all across the country and are seeing really great success in their clean energy investments and are driving positive impacts in communities. And so would recommend, regardless of which state you're in, try to find and connect with a local or regional green bank that may be interested in investing in projects that you know about. And then here, finally, again, wanted to highlight the other grant funding opportunities, mostly for EV charging infrastructure in particular. These programs are at the federal level, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI, which I believe the Electrification Coalition has a lot of resources for how that works, but it's done through states in particular and focused on driving public and private partnerships. And then there's also the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program, or CFI program, and that's really critical for a lot of states and communities to increase charging infrastructure available there. Here, I would really recommend looking at the Electrification Coalition's resources. Their EV funding finder is really outstanding, and I spent a good amount of time this weekend looking through it. So it's a really great resource that hopefully the audience is aware of and can see. But as kind of a final piece here, as you're looking at these projects, it's really important to have a cohesive clean energy finance strategy that uses a foundation of these tax credits and utilizes them to their maximum capability, and then layer on low-cost financing from these federal programs, whether that's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and working with the subawardee there who's looking to invest at a low cost to your project, or finding other federal programs that can further unlock private capital. And that's kind of an overarching strategy here, is we can reduce the risk for private investors to drive more investment in general in clean energy technologies across the economy. Second kind of key thing as well is EV charging in particular. Look to bundle that with other projects that are going on in your community to create better financing opportunities. So whether that's building an affordable housing complex or other areas where EV chargers should be located, ensure that you are looking at on a project, holistic project level for the cheapest and most effective ways to finance the entirety of the project, and not just individual components, which could kind of make it more complex and drive up the overall cost. But would love to hear from you all. What financing strategies have worked well in your communities? What issues have you run into? And what do you need further information on and support for doing this in your communities? And would love to be a resource for that. Please feel free to reach out to my emails here, bennett@s2strategies.org. But also the Electrification Coalition has outstanding resources too. So make sure to reach out to them as well. Thank you all so much for your time and attention, and I'll pass it back to Brant.
All right, Bennett, thank you so much for the bountiful options that you gave people for green financing. And then, of course, plugging our EV Funding Finder. You can find our EV Funding Finder link in our post slides if you want to. And we also could probably send a link out in the chat as well. Also, Lawyers for Good Governance, we work with them very, very closely on all things elective pay. If any of you guys are going to USDN meeting next week, we'll be there as well, talking about elective pay, which is a great way for you to minimize your costs on clean energy projects like EVs and EV infrastructure. So with that, we're going to bring everybody back in. We've already done it, it looks like, and we're going to do a Q&A. Again, thanks for everybody who's been putting in the chat all your questions. If you have any more questions, keep on going. We're going to start them pretty soon, but as they roll in, we'll try and answer them. And we've got about 15 minutes to do so. So we'll start with the first question. And first question was for Francisco. Most of the IRA funding is being directed to cities, states, and public universities are not always eligible. As a government entity, are you partnering with your state universities to help fund or apply for funding for their implementation efforts?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. We see universities as a potential great partner for the Green Innovation Fund. And we are looking for ways to collaborate with our universities. The one thing you have to keep in mind is the Green Innovation Fund is looking for financing, not necessarily grants. So perhaps some of the opportunities that the person who asked the question might be referring to are more like on the grant side. But on the financing side, we definitely want to engage with universities. We understand there might be some barriers we might have to overcome, given the financial structure that for universities. But direct pay is one of those things that we see as a huge opportunity for universities to leverage in order to increase cash flow and enable projects to happen right away. So we want to create bridge loans and products that can enable universities to have access to capital early on the project, so they can have the cash flow to make the projects happen. So I guess the short answer to the question is, we would love to find ways to work with universities so they can participate and build these projects as much as we can.
Excellent, excellent. So there's a question in the chat, says it was, do these green banks serve specific states or operate nationwide? I would ask that question, but I think Bennett had a great slide on it, kind of serving everybody's state that they're in. And so we don't have to go through this one. So we'll move on to the next one. And this one is going to be for everyone, because it was a question, I think, for Nadia, but I think it's probably a good question for everyone to kind of weigh in on. So do you feel that capitalization is an eventual certainty? And we'll start off with Nadia.
Sorry, just trying to get off mute. So when we're talking about capitalization of all the state green banks, is that the question?
Sure, go. I mean,
Okay, I'm gonna take it that way. So
yeah,
one thing
take
I
it that way,
wanna,
yeah.
I'm gonna go that direction. So one of the things, and it ties into the prior question about where do we have state green banks? Another focus area for us is really supporting and working toward all states having a green bank and those green banks being capitalized. So we're actually going to be dedicating funds to that effort and want to see that successful rollout across the entire country. So I will take it as asking about kind of the state network and how do we make sure all of our states and communities have at the state level a green bank. So we are definitely focused on that.
Yeah, and I guess I'll jump in real quick to say I really like that answer, Nadia, and I hope we are ready to work with Coalition for Green Capital here in the state of Wisconsin. You put out a request for projects earlier this summer during the month of June, and we followed that with a request for information to the Wisconsin community about projects that could be built if we had funding, and we had a fantastic response. 350 million worth in projects that can happen, clean energy projects that can happen in Wisconsin, and some of those were in the transportation sector. So, you know, we're ready to partner with Coalition for Green Capital, and we look forward to the opportunity to start doing that work, supporting your goals and supporting the goals of the state's clean energy goals.
Awesome. We're ready too. Somebody asked if we're open for business. Yes, we are, and I can share more details at the right time.
And then Bennett, do you want to answer the question? Do you feel like capitalization is an eventual certainty?
I think it's clear that the entire green energy financing area is going to grow tremendously over the coming 5-10 years. There's a number of different, I mean, states are seeing this really pay off and driving good jobs and opportunities within their communities. And I think that obviously GGRF is a really critical opportunity to make the most of to catalyze this industry for sure. But this industry is here to stay, it's here to grow, and it's going to receive lots of opportunities to expand further. So I'd say, you know, yes, at some point it's a certainty for all of the institutions that we see around, and it's going to be pretty transformative over the next 10 years.
Great, excellent. All right, Bennett, this one's for you. Are vessels or boats included in these programs if they are transportation fleets?
I gotta say, this is one of the most fun questions I think I've ever gotten. I had to do a double check, and I was like, there's not a clean energy tax credit for boats, right? And unfortunately, there's not, you know, the IRS has not expanded its definitions to include vessels and boats. But what I would say is this represents an amazing program and opportunity to get creative with green banks, with GGRF recipients as well, because remember the program goals of GGRF are threefold. They are to reduce emissions generally. Anything that does that could largely qualify. Second is to drive positive impacts in low income and disadvantaged communities in general. And so that this could be a project where you'd have to make it pretty clear as to how this drives those benefits, perhaps. And then third fold is to catalyze private investment. And I'd say if it's pretty clear that there could be a case made, I know that there's a lot of creative green bankers across the country who would love to find an innovative emissions reducing project that finances water vessels and other areas of transportation. So that's a great idea, good concept, and would recommend reaching out afterwards, because would love to hear more about that project if you have it in mind.
Yeah, certainly so. All right, we'll go on to the next question that I'm looking at. So regarding vehicle upfront costs, is funding for diesel to EV conversions also available? This is important from a workforce development perspective. This came through during Nadia's chat. So Nadia, do you want to answer that, please?
Sure. So it certainly could be something we could consider looking at the project, because again, as Bennett was just saying, it's those three criteria. So we are looking for the additionality and showing that we are reducing the emissions, and that conversion would help there. Again, also want to focus on how we can bring in and crowd in other private investment, and then how is it benefiting our communities with that specific focus on LIDAC community. So I would say it certainly could be on the, something we would evaluate. And just for folks to know, our sweet spot for direct investment is between about $50 and $250 million per project. So we are looking at, and that would just be CGC's portion. So we are looking at large projects to really help with scale. So, that might be $1 billion overall project or $500 million, depending. Between about 10 million and 100 million, it might be something also that we might work with one of the state banks that are the state green banks that are in our network. So we really want to help find a way to yes for all projects, whether it's something that we can directly invest in or others. We are, because the goal is to make CGC a perpetual green bank. So we have this amazing seed, $5 billion, but when we look at the trillions of dollars that we're going to need to get us where we need to be in the transition to a clean energy economy, we know it's just a drop in the bucket. So we're also focused on how we can recycle that capital and grow it so that we are, a perpetual national green bank. So yes, we would consider it, and there's a form on our website where you can submit projects.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. All right, we're going to open this back up to everyone. A question came through. How much are you all coordinating with your local utility companies and their decarbonization efforts? Our utilities are now keeping fossil assets online longer due to increased demand for electrification from transportation and data centers, et cetera. How is this impacting your efforts to electrify?
I can go first because this question, in a way, appeals to the engineering side of me. So I think I will answer that question. I will make 3 statements. The first one is, we're looking forward to collaborating with our utility partners as much as we can, and we're here. So our doors are open to work with utilities and support our clean energy transition and our increasing energy demands in any way that makes sense to utilities that support the state's clean energy goals. So I will say that as we are looking for ways to collaborate with utilities, and in some ways we are. I will also say renewable generation is the lowest cost generation today. So, I don't see a reason why we are not generating more electricity from renewables, which we are. And if you look at the national trends and global trends, that's the way the industry is moving. I will also say the regulatory and the permitting side of renewable generation, there is nothing about that process that's significantly different from other sorts of generation. So I think that people sometimes have this misconception that to site and interconnect renewable energy, that process is a longer, more expensive, more complicated process than interconnecting renewables. And that is not necessarily true. And it's an assumption that we should check before we move on thinking like, you can't do renewables because it's just too complicated. But the main point, and if you take anything from my response, I want to take this, is electric vehicle charging is a very flexible load. And the electricity market is a very variable market. So the beauty of electrifying the transportation sector is that we can use electric vehicles as an asset to almost flatten that curve of electric use or electricity use throughout the day, and use electric vehicles as a way to reduce the cost, because we can charge our electric fleet without the need to build significant generation, because we will just use electricity for EV charging when electricity is cheap and abundant, and limit that use when electricity is scarce and expensive. That way, we can get more out of the system that we already have. We can get more kilowatt hours, useful kilowatt hours, without the need to build additional generation, which reduces the marginal cost of each kilowatt hour of electricity. So therefore benefiting everybody. So it's something that we don't often think. We think, okay, we're electrifying transportation. That means we have to increase our electric grid by so many, it's not necessarily the case. I think we have to think about the fact that oftentimes our electricity grid is underutilized, and that's the time where you want to charge your EVs and make sure that we're taking advantage of that infrastructure that's already in place.
That's an excellent answer. Does the rest of the panel want to answer the question? The question again was, how are you all coordinating with your local utility companies and their decarbonization efforts? And if not, we can move on to the next one.
I'll just say, echo what Francisco is saying, working at a utility for 17 years previously in many different areas. You're right. And a lot of that's going to come down to customer education, awareness, and behavior to participate in things like managed charging, demand response, to, optimize the efficiency. And a lot of times people will, electrification of transportation puts downward pressure on customers' rates, because exactly what you're saying, you're using the grid more efficiently, right? Your fixed costs are there and you're using that grid more efficiently. So I think certainly that has to be part of the equation. And one thing that we really want to think about is how can we make it a seamless customer experience so that customers want to do it. And that they feel like there's a lot to think about here, but sending the right signals and messages to customers. But I would say data centers are also very interesting because they need that firm, they need the resiliency, the reliability, they need their firm power. And so there is probably, we've seen a sense to, well, maybe natural gas is the way to go. And so one of the things we're thinking about is, how do we incentivize more renewables, say solar and storage, and things like that. So great questions. And we do, I would say, also coordinate early with your utility, because things can take longer. And sometimes it can be some significant investments that are needed. But I'm optimistic overall.
And Bennett?
I think they did a great job, and I don't want to spend too much more time on it, but I know that we have other questions to get to. So back to you, Brant.
Yeah, sure, of course. Okay. This one's for Nadia. What is the timing for Coalition for Green Capital releasing fund? Is there an application or call for projects available for review?
Yes, we have actually billions of dollars of projects, potential projects that have already been submitted. So we're evaluating that now, and you can go to our website and submit proposals. We are looking at creating a much more structured kind of RFP type of evergreen or ongoing RFP that'll be coming at some point here in the near future. So we are open for business. We want to invest quickly because we know the challenge is here and now, and the faster we can invest in great projects, the better we'll be doing our job. So we're open now.
Great, awesome. Okay, so this one came in during the Q&A, so this wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but this is just a general question that anybody can answer. Do the green banks provide an opportunity for investments by individuals and or public pension funds? Anybody can answer that on the panel.
Go ahead, Francisco.
We'll go with Francisco, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Didn't want to be the first one to speak on the last few questions, but anyway, it's something that we're looking for the Green Innovation Fund. So, green banks engage a bunch of different strategies for capitalization, and we've seen great examples from Connecticut green banks and other green banks that have been operating and finding great ways to raise capital. This is impact investment, right? So it's something that we will consider. The Green Innovation Fund has been heavily focused on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund because we are a 1.5-year-old green bank that started right at the moment when everybody was talking about the incredible opportunity to invest in green projects through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So knowing that we have limited bandwidth, you have to be very intentional on where we put our energy, and that has been on leveraging the federal funding opportunity. As that federal funding opportunity, it runs its course, we need to start being more creative about how we capitalize our bank to continue doing the great work that we have to do. Whether or not there is a greenhouse gas reduction fund, that's when the question comes in is, we will be pursuing other ways to capitalize the bank. It's just that it's a matter of time for us.
This also
All right. Nadia, do you have anything to add to that? Or Bennett, do you have anything to add to that?
One quick note is that this also does speak to the purpose of a lot of these programs, and that it's trying to leverage private capital. And so particularly on a project by project basis, there are so many opportunities for co-investments. Like the strategy here is that the Green Bank can use its expertise within clean energy financing, take a perhaps perceived as riskier position or be able to de-risk the project in certain ways, and then free up space for individuals, public pension funds, private investors, large banks to fill out the rest of that capital stack and make a project possible. So I'd say like that really, speaks to the purpose of all of these programs coming together and facilitating more private investment in green finance or green and clean technologies opportunities.
Well said.
Yeah, and I guess the most important thing that I should have said that I forgot was, if you're an individual or an entity interested in investing, just come talk to us. We'll be happy to have a conversation and see how we can leverage that your resources to deploy more clean energy.
All right, I think that's a great way to end this. We're at the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you for your wonderful questions. Thank you for the panelists for the thoughtful discussions. Thank you, Francisco, Nadia, and Bennett, for joining us today and for all of their presentations and their viewpoints. I think this was incredibly insightful, so thank you. To bring it back to full circle, thank you for joining us on the inaugural Monday of, the inaugural week, the Monday of the Charging Infrastructure Week. Follow us the rest of the week on social media during Charging Infrastructure Week, and join us on Thursday for our State of the EV Industry webinar. Stay tuned if you can for the post slides for links to both that EV funding finder that Bennett plugged in for us and all of our upcoming webinars. And then take care and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.